in the Ozarks have a lot of what we call preppers, or people that are, they think they're ready for it, whatever it might be. No.
No.
No amount of ammunition, no amount of food will probably help, but they'll also make you a target. There's a lot of things you just don't think about.
Your gun will not save you from the mob.
Right, a gun will not save you from the mob. There's just no way to prepare yourself for what's coming.
Hey y'all, put on your boots, grab your headphones, and let's get a little muddy.
As we build a community rooted in the love of dirt roads, whether dust or mud.
Welcome to the Dust or Mud Podcast. Hi, everybody. Welcome to episode number 17 of the Dust or Mud Podcast. Thank you for joining us. Today, we have a really super special treat. We have special guests visiting with us. We're going to have a conversation about freedom. We have Andrew and Anna Filipov, and they have a story or their life experiences are we're going to dive into freedom.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Andrew, we got this right, I think, in our pre-conversation. Both of you from the Soviet Union.
Correct.
Yes.
But it turned into both of you from different countries.
Yes.
And
so we were born in one country, and then we turned out to be in different countries.
Awesome. This is going to be such a great conversation. And you came to the U.S. You've been here for quite a while now, citizens of the United States, and we'll get through all of that. And to me, this episode, we are all going to get a huge lesson in freedom, and I'm really excited as we dive into this. So,
okay,
All right, here we go. So, tell us about what are some of your earliest memories of living in the Soviet Union?
Just the regular childhood memories, going outside, hanging out with friends, spending summer with grandparents, going to school.
Yeah.
I guess my earliest memories would be taking strolls coming back from preschool. My dad would pick me up after work and we would be going home. Winter, it's going to be dark. He would be pointing out in the stars and teaching me English.
Oh, wow.
Oh.
So
That's cool. Why did your dad know English?
He was in the military all his life, basically. He went into military academy when he was like 14 or something.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and he was the head of a military academy in St. Petersburg, and he was, I'm not sure, like chief or dean of the international faculty.
Oh, wow.
So when he spoke English, he spoke Spanish. He actually was, he served in Cuba for 4 years during the Caribbean Missile Crisis.
Yeah.
So he had some interesting stories.
I guess.
I guess so.
Wow.
Yeah.
Andrew, how about you? What are some of your earliest
Pretty much the same, just childhood stuff. Mom, dad on the seashore, Baltic Sea sunsets, things like that. Nothing really crazy, just working like Anna said. Pretty much any kid would be hanging out with grandparents and doing something for the summer while parents are working.
Yeah.
The grandkid, he'll be slaving for the grandparents. I mean, talking about gardening and
taking care of animals if there were any.
Yeah.
And
Mm-hmm.
but
watering
you're
things.
learning all the life skills.
Yeah.
So, I mean, not everybody, there were a lot of kids who were like living in the city. And, during summer, they would go into summer camps.
Okay.
But if you had a chance to go to the country, I mean, you'll be shipped off for the summer. And then you learn some valuable life skills like how to take care of animals, how to milk a cow, how to tend to the garden.
Really cool.
Really
sometimes
valuable life
building
skills.
stuff.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
Oh, yeah. How you put things together, how you arrange on things, how to take things apart.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, you may not put them back together, but hey,
Yeah.
I mean, that's pretty much standard childhood for most of the people back then.
Yeah.
So, what would you say would be one of like the most misunderstood things about the Soviet Union that people from the West would have? Like,
Well, the bears are not walking on the streets.
They're not drinking vodka. They're not playing ball like us.
oh,
I think it's ideological load because
okay,
when people think about communism, we're talking about something like Myanmar or some crazy coup,
yeah,
bunch of people running with the AKs and red flags.
Yeah, people not marching in the streets. There was a period when that was happening during the revolution, in 1917 when that all happened. Yes, of course, there were people marching on the streets, running around with flags and posters and everything else. But
yeah.
other than that, like, it's a regular
But that
life.
was not your childhood.
That wasn't your childhood.
No.
No, I think
You grew
by
up in the
time,
80s.
Yeah.
It was in the 80s. I think the ideological load went to nothing, and people were just sort of doing their thing. I mean, you get up, go to work, go to school. You would, like, in school, they would teach you who Lenin was and who Marx was, but it really wasn't that big of a load to where, no, this is what you have to know, this is what you have to do.
Mm.
I think probably by that time, a lot of people were disillusioned.
Mm.
So they're like, okay, whatever.
Well, another thing I just thought about, going to school and, it was still Soviet Union before the collapse and everything else. Kids never paid attention who's rich, who's not. We all had uniforms. We had to go to school to uniforms. And this, class separation was never an issue. We were all equal.
Mm.
So you would never get bullied because you're from a poor family or your family cannot afford the latest fashion clothes, or you don't have the best backpack,
or your iPhone is not current model.
Yeah,
right.
So in a sense, it was. I mean, I can't say everybody was equally poor, but they were at the same time. I mean,
Yeah.
poor is, there's so many meanings to it.
Yes.
But people did not have much.
Right.
By the standards that we lived back then, it was enough because you didn't know any better.
Mm.
I mean, you had your clothes, you had your food, you had your house. Really, what else do you need?
Mm-hmm.
Now we're just trying to keep up with the wants. Where back then I was like, okay, well, it seems like you got enough. You get to go to play somewhere on a playground or go to the lake or as a kid when you're a kid.
Right.
That was it. I mean, that was, if you get to go somewhere in summer camp, that was huge.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But nobody thought about, I need this phone, or I need these shoes, or I need this, I need that.
Well, and then again, as kids, we never really paid attention much to it. And for growing ups, it was different. Having a washing machine, it was a big deal. Because, in the 70s, early 80s, not every household had a washing machine.
Right. Mm.
Consumer goods were pretty much not existent, like washing machines. I mean, that was a big... TV was a pretty big deal. I mean, you would have to sign up. Let's say there's an electronics store. You would go in, but you have to sign up for the line or waiting list. And that may take a month, that may take a year, depending on how many TVs they're going to produce according to the manufacturing plan.
Oh, wow.
Because it was planned. Like Soviet Union had a planned economy.
I mean,
they had a what?
It was called planned economy.
Planned economy. Okay.
So the government says we need 1 million TVs produced before this date, and
we want to make sure that we produce enough so nothing is sitting out on the shelves.
And then, well, what if you need 1 million and 100,000? Well, you're out of luck.
You'll have to wait till next year.
You have to wait till next year, next production year, and then...
And it's not just TV, it was the cars too. I remember people were waiting for 5 years to buy a car.
Wow.
Wow.
You can get it secondhand, but then you're paying premium.
On a second hand.
So,
Well, and people would get creative. I remember my dad was telling a story how one of his co-workers would put all of his relatives on this waiting list for the cars, his mother-in-law, father-in-law, uncles, aunts, and everybody who he can. And like once their turn comes in, he would buy that car from them, and then he would just sell it on the secondary market. So
Yeah. Found a way to make money out of it.
yeah.
the government was not too happy about it, but I can't really say that it was illegal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it was frowned upon, I guess, but cool.
And then again, this is something that wouldn't have fly during Stalin era, for example, or even like Khrushchev's era. It wouldn't fly. But then, closer towards the end, the 70s, 80s, was a
Yeah,
little
there
bit
was
different.
one word that we're talking about Gorbachev was, Perestroika, Reconstruction, glasnost, freedom of speech, but there's also another one that was deficit, which is deficit. And it was a deficit of everything. Especially consumer goods. I mean,
Toilet paper, soap, any cosmetics, I was telling you that my mother was a dentist, and like people would come and there was this thing, and it's, it's a countrywide, it's part of the mentality, I guess. You go to see a doctor, you have to bring a gift, a box of chocolates, a bottle of cognac or something, or French perfume or some makeup, but it was not readily available at the stores.
Wow.
So
that's why there was no point in bribing somebody. I mean, I can give you X amount of rubles, but what are you going to do with that?
Yeah.
Right.
I mean,
yeah.
If you can't buy anything for them, and that was the funniest thing because it seems like there's nothing in the stores, but everybody had something stashed somewhere.
And everybody had connections, and if you needed some good meat, you would call your friend who is working at the butchering department at the store, and then
somebody knew somebody always.
Right. So we teased it a little bit, or I did, about you grew up in the same country, but were there differences like ethnically, or were you both like was there any family differences?
So whenever I don't think we mentioned it yet, that you were both born in one country, which was Soviet Union, but then you wind up in Latvia and you wind up in Russia.
Yeah.
And so what were the differences?
It was consistent of 15 republics, and every republic had its ethnic flavor, I guess you can say. Every ethnicity tried to keep their traditions, like you're talking Armenia, Azerbaijan, Georgia. I mean, those countries have thousands of years of history and traditions, and it was all kept.
Yeah.
And at the same time, we were all Soviet people, were all equal. So in difference of upbringing too, and then every family is going to be different too. Somebody was a little better off, somebody was a little better off, better educated.
Right.
But overall, like in between people, I never saw any hostility toward different nationalities. It all started after the fall.
Got it.
Okay.
After the fall of the Soviet Union.
Okay.
And we're pretty much the same way. I mean, there's really not that big of a difference between. I mean, we have relatives in St. Petersburg, and we did go to Russia a couple times, and it's not. I couldn't tell that big of a difference between where we were versus Russia. Again, depending on where you go, it's a huge country. I mean,
Sure.
Huge.
And everybody you ask them might have different answers there, but
then like Baltic states like Latvia, Estonia, Lithuania, they were considered the face of the Soviet Union. So basically to go there, it was almost going to a different country.
Oh, okay.
it was a little more.
A little more European.
European. What happened was
More tourists.
Historical influences too. I mean,
okay.
you looking at Tallinn, the capital of Estonia. I mean, that's how Paris looked in the 1400s.
Such a neat city.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
Well, it survived World War II. Was all being majorly bombed, and so it's one of those in the Baltic states. One of the better cities to go to as far as just the architecture, the old. You actually feel the old city, 1,000-year-old walls and catacombs, and yeah, it's such a good experience going there. But it was a Russian Empire before the USSR. It was just part of empire. It was just there was no countries like Latvia or Armenia or Georgia or and Lenin's thing, Marx's thing was every nation has the right of self-determination. As a matter of fact, with all the stuff we've got going on now between Israel and Palestine, in Russia now, back then in the Soviet Union, there was actually Jewish autonomy. They just said, the Soviet government said, okay, we're going to have this plot of land and it's going to be Jewish autonomy. Wow. Was Latvia, I mean, some of those borders were kind of drawn depending on where the World War One stopped, and there are so many things going on there, but the key was every nation was supposed to have a right of self-determination, so every nation basically said, okay, we're going to carve out a piece of empire. And they created countries, and some existed for a long time, some were new, and then those were joined back together was in the USSR.
And I'm sorry, and about self-determination too, like going back to the Soviet Union schools, they all studied Russian. Russian was the official language, but then in the republics, all the kids also studied their national language. Like in Ukraine, they had, Ukrainian language. In Latvia, they studied Latvian.
Okay.
In Armenia, they studied Armenian. Georgian, yeah.
Now when we look at it and I hear, well, Latvian language, it was banned during USSR, and it's like, it doesn't make sense. I mean, I remember, gosh, my birth certificate was in 2 languages.
Really?
Oh, wow.
The storefronts were always in 2 languages. So I'm not sure where that's coming from, but, that's how kids are being brought up now that, they were so oppressed and they couldn't speak their language. I mean, there was Latvian schools and there was Russian schools. It just depends on, and a lot of times, Latvian families would prefer to have their own school versus having Russians to go to Latvian school as well, just because languages, most of the time, Latvians will pick up Russian a lot easier than Russians will pick up Latvian, just language differences. So you put a couple Russian kids in the Latvian class, and all of a sudden, the whole class speaks Russian. They were trying to avoid that. But it's just the way it was. So I can't really say there was a lot of ethical tensions. I'm sure, again, there was things here and there, but...
Well, like I have relatives in Ukraine, I had relatives in Georgia, and I always remember talking to relatives, and they all studied their own language. They studied their literature in their own language, so...
Got it. Yeah. So let's go to the 80s, going into the late 80s as things are starting to decline. How bad did it get?
So this would be under Gorbachev, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So very bad and very quickly.
Yes.
Really?
Yeah.
So did it was there any lead up to it, or I know we talked about Perestroika and Glasnost. Was it like were those what led up to things getting bad? Were they getting bad already? Like how did the progression happen?
There were several things that were happening economically. Part of it was Gorbachev enacted dry laws. I mean, the state had a monopoly on alcohol sales. Now, when you think about it, well, not a big deal, but it's a huge amount of taxes and profits for the state.
Oh, wow.
So that went out the door. Then several wars like in Afghanistan, and I mean, that was a huge drain on the budget as well. So there's a combination of all those little things, and some are big, some are little, but the economy was sputtering, and then the oil prices dropped. I think it was like down to $5 a barrel at some point, because where USSR was one of the big exporters of oil.
Mm-hmm.
So things started sputtering, and at the same time, store shelves went bare. Um, so you couldn't buy your everyday stuff, and all of a sudden your ruble or
So
currency just
what
devalued.
caused the shortage in goods?
Combination of panic buying.
Okay.
Um, I think that was the biggest thing.
Like people, did they see something
They
on
saw
the
it coming?
horizon, do you think?
Well, you got to understand that Russian history is war, trying to rebuild, war, trying to rebuild. Every time the winds blow from a different direction, people just go into let's buy it out mode. I mean,
It's
nothing.
probably like on a genetic level already.
Yeah, I mean,
Go into the survival mode.
Right.
you just got this fifth sense where it's like, okay, matches, people buying out matches, sugar, salt,
Buckwheat.
buckwheat,
Wow.
kind of like rice here.
Yeah.
And so people start stashing stuff, and all of a sudden, again, it's planned economy.
Okay.
It's not like you can go and say, well, give us 5 more tons of meat on the next run. No, because your collective farm is supposed to manufacture X amount of goods in this amount of time. You're not going to get more stuff out of them because that's what they're supposed to do. And then in the next 5 years, when they're going to have a next plan, it may change. But in the meantime, if you bought everything out,
That's just it.
that's just it. I mean, you're not going to get anything out of anywhere just because that's what was planned. One thing that happened was Gorbachev was he went to this model that was kind of a hybrid, and there were some co-ops that were starting. So you had farmers that were starting, there were co-ops. Problem was that was usually their prices would be 3, 4, or 5 times higher than the state price of the store. So you'd have 2 pieces of meat, and one would be ruble, the other one's 5 for a kilo. Well, people couldn't really afford the expensive stuff because everybody's salaries were still the same.
Right.
Right.
So they were starting to introduce market economy
Okay.
in the private sector, and yet most of the government stuff were still on that planned economy.
So you've got combative economy.
weird mix
a
going
weird
on.
mix going on.
Exactly. I mean, you're working for a state most of the time. I mean, majority, 99% of people, we work, whether it's factory, whatever, but you're still working for
Right.
the government one way or the other.
No matter what you were doing.
No matter what.
Yeah, because all the
exactly.
factories, all the production basically belong to the government.
So your salary is still the same, whatever was set based on your profession and the level of proficiency.
Right.
So you're not going to make more, and then all of a sudden the price of stuff disappeared, and then the prices went up 5 times. You can still buy this, but then you don't really make that money. It's not like you can kick it up a notch and make some extra.
So inflation.
But Anna, your dad was a military officer. Your mom was a dentist. You all must have been well off then. Right?
No. Well, I mean, I can't say we were poor. We were middle class, if you can say that. But we're not rich by any means. So, it's just one of their childhood memories too. The payday, parents would just sit down at the kitchen table with, there was no checks or any, electronic currency back then. So your wages were given to you, and hard cash, and they would just be sitting there separating the piles. This is to pay for the utilities, this is to pay off this debt, this is to pay that friend who we borrowed money from. Okay, this money we'll allocate for food, and this is
That's interesting, because in this country, like a dentist and a military officer would get paid pretty well. You would be, especially with both, that would be a quite nice salary. So if the we would call it white collar here, right? And if white collar workers were not getting I don't know, I guess the salary we would expect, who was getting it? Like who was more well off?
Blue collar.
Blue collar.
Absolutely. I mean, if you're a blue collar, you're actually making decent money.
Why?
But that's how the economy was set up. I mean, there's really not a lot of rhyme or reason there, because the state said so.
The factory worker, in a lot of cases, the factory worker would make more money than a university professor.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Because they brought a skill in manufacturing to the table.
Yep.
I guess.
And the best paying jobs were for people to go work up north, on the oil rigs, gas rigs, gold mines,
the coal resources.
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 Harvesting resources.
Yep.
A lot of people would go up north to work on the oil rigs. They work there for 6 months and then come back
and
home for 6 months and just live like kings.
Wow.
Yeah, those are the people that could afford
cars,
keeping up with the inflation and exactly, cars and vacations. And but again, most of the vacations, though, when you think about it, it would be
state sponsored.
So if you're a blue collar worker, a couple of things are going to happen to you. You probably will be hospitalized for about a week, 2 weeks for a full medical. Everything.
They will do your X-rays. They make sure you don't have TB, your lungs in good health.
They
heart,
make sure
everything.
that you're good to go. After
blood tests for any mineral deficiencies.
Oh, yeah. After that, you'll probably be sent somewhere south, depending on where you at.
Well, yeah. Say you're working in the factory. You're lifting a lot of heavy stuff, so your back is probably not in the best of shape, so they'll send you to a special. They were called sanatoriums that would specialize. Yeah, that would specialize in treatment of back problems, and there you'll have 3 meals a day. They'll provide. They'll do special treatments for you. Like they'll look at your case specifically and will prescribe the physical therapy that you need to do, special exercises, or
you have digestive problems, they'll send you to a place that will specialize in digestive issues, and they'll work out a menu just for you. And it's funny, my mom actually a couple years ago, she stated some of them are still functioning as a private enterprise now, but people that used to go there when they were young, they're paying book of money just to go there.
Oh, wow.
And it's sort of, nothing really changed there. It's still the same decor, still the same rooms, probably the same menu, but but it was just interesting to see that it still sort of goes on.
Wow.
So Gorbachev and the Berlin Wall and Ronald Reagan and the whole, tear down this wall, for us. Whew, that was a huge thing. Yay.
Non-event.
What?
Nope.
Non-event.
Saw it on TV. It was like, yeah, whatever. Wasn't that big of a deal.
Wow. Okay. Where were you when the Soviet Union collapsed?
I was actually in Siberia with my grandma.
Oh, wow.
Okay. How did you find out?
Through the news on the TV. Mm-hmm. We were actually, as I remember, we were getting ready for a birthday party, and we were making a cake while watching a TV, and then you see all this news coming through, and we just didn't know what to make out of it.
Yeah.
I remember the growing ups were being in the state of shock, like, okay, what's going to happen now? What's happening? What's going on? And nobody knew everything because, again, media was still controlled, and the bits and pieces you would get through the news were not really making much sense.
Wow. Where were you?
That was summer break, like right at the end. So we're getting ready to go back to schools because September 1st is beginning of the year.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the same thing. Everybody's in a state of confusion. Um,
Mm-hmm.
well, picture something like Texas, Colorado, Florida, and say a couple more states. Their governors get together and they sign a piece of paper that says U.S. doesn't no longer exist. And you're like, how does that supposed to work?
Right.
I mean, it just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
And but in reality, I think the society was at the point where they were ready to go their separate ways. Didn't really work out all that well for a lot of people, but what was done was done. I mean, there's still arguments whether or not it had any kind of legitimacy, where it was literally Ukraine, Russia, and Belarus. They got together and they signed this thing going, "Oh, we're going to dissolve USSR." And Kazakhstan was ahead of USSR. I think Almaty was the capital for a little bit.
Oh.
And like Azerbaijan, Armenia was still parts of it after Russia already left it.
Wow.
So it was weird times. There were a lot of confusion, and then economically too. Like you work in a factory that's part of the supply chain. You say you're making wheel that's supposed to go to this factory that makes cars.
Mm-hmm.
Well, now this factory is in a different country, and just the basic things of how do you regulate everything, who's paying you, are they? I mean, there is just so many things that all of a sudden people never thought about, and they came into play.
Wow.
Part of it could be too is that with Gorbachev and that the glasnost and perestroika thing, it opened the doors for Western culture to come in.
Okay.
Because before that, with the Iron Curtain, there were little bits and pieces people will know about the Western society, but not as much. And then all of a sudden, this gate opens, and then Soviet Union is flooded with the movies, with the magazines, and people looking at it like, wow, that's how they really live.
So you think that led up to some of the
Yeah, well, because people
the
think,
different
look at
countries?
those people, how the Santa Barbara soap opera was a big deal, and then people would watch it and they're like, oh my God, this is how they live in America. How come we're not living like that? And it was building the social tensions too.
Oh, yeah.
All
So
you have to do is overthrow the government, and you get a nice car and half naked girls running around, and a mansion somewhere in the ocean shore. Yeah, that was kind of perception of Western culture and style. Soviet Union was boring in a lot of ways.
Okay.
I mean,
How?
well, you get 3 types of cars. That's what you get.
3.
You get an apartment.
Okay.
Well, there's probably more, but some of them military and
Mm-hmm.
let's just say 3 major brands. The clothing, because they make 5 million shoes of this design.
Everyone
and then
wears the
5
same
million
kind of
shoes
shoes.
of that design.
Mm.
So you're gonna get
either
maybe
this or that.
5 different
between.
varieties of the store. That's all you get
Mm.
for the next 5 years till the planned economy changes, and then they get the designs in, and then they do update, and then you might get different color shoe, the same stuff. But
So you don't get to be original.
No.
Everybody had the same stuff. Everybody, that's why nobody was fighting over it, just because it's all the same stuff. So that was a huge part of it. I mean, a lot of people though, the women. I mean, everybody can sew. Everybody can put together a dress in a couple of days, probably. And the thing was trying
Knitting, sewing, yep.
Yeah.
Oh, right.
Well, that
So you
was
could
the
make
only
your
way
own.
to be original.
You can make your own.
Because you can make your own.
Well, and like, what is it? We had 2 or 3 magazines in Soviet Union for women, and everybody would prescribe to them because
Subscribe.
subscribe to them because every magazine will have like a little section on the cooking there. That's how women would get their recipes. And then there will be a section on fashion, or how to knit this sweater, or how to make the dress.
Well,
Wow.
so you mentioned things were starting to get bad as building up to the collapse. Did it get worse, or what happened then? Like, okay, it was crazy at first, and we didn't know what to think of it. Then what? Like, did things get really bad?
Practically overnight. It's like you go to the store, you buy a loaf of bread for like 1 ruble, and then you wake up next morning and it's 1,200 rubles. And then people lost all of their savings, whatever they had. It just turned into paper money. Everything disappeared. A lot of factories closed down, or a lot of them kept going. People were producing it, but then the
Didn't have the money
heads
to
will
buy
come
it.
out and say, "Hey guys, we did not get any money from the government. We cannot pay you." So a lot of people kept working for like 6 months with no pay. And all of a sudden, like, I have a friend, her mom worked at the factory that was making computer monitors. And then they said, we can't pay you. We didn't get any money from the government to pay you. So here's 6 computer monitors for you in lieu of the back wages. Do whatever you want.
Wow.
Oh, there's one thing with Gorbachev too. Then there's another word called conversion. That's when a lot of military plants were converted to civilian needs, and the idea was to boost the civilian production. So that's where you get those titanium shovels and people that used to put together rockets. Now they're making toys. I mean, it was funny at times and sad at the same time.
So people got hungry.
Yeah.
Well,
And how? So
imagine
if there's no
everything's-
food on the shelves, where did the food come from then?
Dacha,
Dacha.
dacha.
Okay.
Everybody-
Just what does dacha mean, and describe it.
Victory garden,
Oh, okay.
in a sense.
Okay.
But
Got
everybody
it.
had a plot of land. Again, when you look at Russian history, it's
Okay.
always just country gets destroyed, rebuild, and people so used to rely on themselves. I think self-reliance was a huge part of it, even
Okay.
now. I mean, everybody's still doing the same thing. You can tell fat years from lean years. If you drive down there, dachas usually there would be co-ops, so you would have depending on the regulations, a certain amount of land
Okay.
was a small summer house. Again, depending on regulations, there was certain standards how big it can be. Some were tiny things, so you can just store shovels in like a little shed. Some were more of a decent sized summer cottage.
And that would be where the land is located.
Yeah.
Okay.
They'll be on the land. And if you drive through those co-ops and everybody's planting grass, then it's fat years. If
Okay.
everybody is digging the dirt and planting vegetables and bushes,
So what would be the average
leaves.
size that, say, a family of 4 would have to grow food on?
The standard was
And everyone was issued this? Was it an issued thing from the government, or
You
did you have to
could-
purchase?
you
You could
apply-
issue it, you could apply for it, you can buy
You
it.
could buy it. Standard size was called 600s, which is basically 600 square meters.
Okay.
So you take that almost 600 yards, multiply that, was it by 9? You get your square feet, but basically 600 yards.
Okay.
And
Square yards.
yep, that would feed a family of 4. Well, I don't know
If you
about
get
feed.
creative, it can be
If
2
you get
families.
creative, yeah.
Yes.
A lot of people would rent some land, and
Okay.
that's actually a viable thing even nowadays. Was the people always worried about food shortage and things. If you have somebody like a farmer nearby, and you can rent a small plot of land. It's amazing what you can do
Mm.
and the things you can grow on it. But we had the dacha, and we had a couple more plots of land where we would
Plant potatoes,
plant potatoes.
Mhm.
cabbages, maybe.
Yep. So get your basic vegetables and canning done, and
Mm.
all you got to do is hunt for the proteins.
Mm.
And that can be, I mean, there is always a farmer's market. And those things always, farmer's market always existed. It was just more expensive than the stores. And again, you kind of gauge it with your income.
But and the same thing happening right now. You can get stuff at the store. You can get it at the farmer's market. It's going to be more expensive, but the quality is of no comparison.
Right.
Got it.
Right.
And
Got it.
when the system broke down, and farmers markets are probably the only place where you can actually get stuff.
Hmm.
I mean, people were still growing things, and I had a buddy. They had like a good 100 acres where they just planted potatoes,
Oh wow.
and they were killing it.
Yeah.
He had an old rusted out Mercedes van, and I mean, you can see through that thing. But they were holding sacks of potatoes, about 50 kilo per sack, and that was the normal thing. Like in the fall, people would go and buy 2 sacks of potatoes, 50 kilos, so about 100 kilos of potatoes. They'll last you for a few months.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that was cheap.
It'll get you through the winter.
That will get you through the winter. That will get
Yep.
you the cold months.
Well,
Some pickles and some sauerkraut.
Mm-hmm.
You're
Oh,
set.
yeah. There you go.
wow.
So good.
So good.
Throw some bacon to the mix. That'll be nice.
That's right.
Well, you see, and like now we see the value of the food, and it actually nutritionally is good for you.
Mm-hmm.
But then the Soviet Union was falling apart, and then McDonald's came in. And oh my God, that's hamburgers and French fries and Coke.
Yeah.
It's kind of funny how we go full circle.
Right.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So what led then to your decision to come to the United States?
Oh, that's an interesting story. So I started working as an interpreter when I was 14. So with some American missionaries.
Mm-hmm.
I spoke English, not as well back then. I was still learning, but still enough. And the funny thing is, back then, in a week, I would make more money than my teacher at school would make in a month.
Oh wow.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Mm.
Got some
At
friends
14.
there, and
At 14.
at 14,
Mm.
yes. And then I was getting ready after school. I was getting ready to go into the police academy, high police academy, it was called. And at the time, it was the best law education you can get in the country.
Mm-hmm.
And then plus you go and you get a stipend from the military school. So basically, you earn wages while you
Learning.
learning. Yeah, and it was one of the best stipends at the time too.
Mm-hmm.
And things didn't work out. I had some knee issues, so I didn't pass the medical test. And friends of mine just fill out an application for me to come here and go to college.
Cool.
So you came to the United States to go to college.
Yes, I graduated from
Essentially.
college, and I had some relatives in Colorado.
At how old? Teens?
I was 16.
16?
Yes.
Going to college in California?
Yep, I graduated when I was 18.
From college.
Yep.
Nice. Wow.
Wow.
How about you, Andrew?
Well, I went to international law college, and we're studying EU regulations, UN regulations, all kinds of things. And for the summer, I figured I'll just get me a summer job. And that was at the dawn of the internet. Found this website, Summer Jobs Online or something like that. And just out of the blue, there was this one posting in Defiance, Iowa.
Okay.
Good luck trying to find on the map even now. And I wrote the guy a quick email going, "Hey, I'm interested in shoveling concrete for a summer. Would you take me on?" He goes, "Sure, come on over." And that was it.
Wow.
So next thing you know, I'm in Chicago with $50 in my pocket and a map and trying to figure out where Defiance, Iowa is. That was an interesting experience, but I did make it to a little town called Boondocks. And
Literally.
literally Boondocks. And trying to make it to the motel where our crew was staying. Again, no car, no. Everywhere you go in Europe is public transportation.
This is pretty much a
so the
road crew construction kind of concrete situation.
Right. Yeah, I mean, they just travel the state and
stayed in the hotels, working at the interstates and stuff.
Exactly. I mean,
and you're how old at this point?
18.
So you're 18.
19.
You fly to another country.
Yep.
You have no idea where you're going.
Yep.
And not much money.
No, I think that was the worst.
Yeah.
Now looking back at it, then I was like, whatever.
Yeah.
I mean,
I would do it again with more money.
Oh gosh. Well, I don't know about that. I mean, it'll be horrifying.
Yeah.
No,
You don't think about it. You just do it.
You just kind of do it.
Yeah.
But now when you're looking back at it, you're going, oh my God. And so I checked into a motel, trying to get something to eat. And there's a McDonald's about 2 miles away, just kind of down cornfield away. And here I am just walking down, grab me, I think back then number one was like either $2.98 or $3.
Yeah.
John, on the way back, there's a big construction truck just flying by, hit the brakes, backs up. Goes, "Are you Andrew?" I'm like, yeah. He goes, "Come on in." And that's how I met my boss and friend, Roberto. And I'm like, "How do you know?" He goes, "Well, we don't walk down the highways around here." So I figured it was you.
You are out of place.
Yeah, that's how I started. I mean, next day I was literally on the road shoveling concrete.
Wow. So are there any parts of American culture or life here that you found really surprising? Like
Paying for something at the store, that was a culture shock. You know, you go in, you buy something, whatever, say it's $100, you come to the register and it's 110 or 111 depending on what the tax rate is.
Taxes,
Yes.
Sales tax.
Yeah, because back home there is definitely taxes on everything you buy, but it's already configured in the price. So whatever you see, that's what you're gonna pay.
Right.
Yeah. So here it's a little different.
Yeah, we understand that. That happened to us when we went to England.
Yes.
Except opposite.
It was opposite, right? Mm-hmm.
The price was just the price.
Yeah, if it said £5 or £100, it was £100.
Yep.
The end. There was nothing. All the VAT was already on it.
Yeah.
Yep, it's already calculated in.
And which is very smart of them to do that because it's 17%. And so when you're paying 17% at that time in 2005, 6, 17% tax, and you go up and it's £100 and they add 17%, that's going to hurt, you know? So
all added in.
Go ahead, just go ahead. Nothing to see here. Right?
Yep.
How about you, Andrew?
Just the way people go about their business. I mean, that was different. I mean, stores, I don't think it was really that much at that time, it wasn't that big of a difference just because Latvia at that point, I mean.
Well, even so, like even Russia at that point, you know, if you go to the store, you don't get the shock of the overabundance of everything in there because by that time, Russia was pretty well stocked.
Okay. Right.
But let's say we'll be stopping for a break and Bertie goes, okay, let's go get something to eat. And don't go to whatever, Dairy Queen or. I'm like, you just covered in concrete, you're dirty and smell like diesel fuel. I'm like, well, aren't we supposed to change, take a shower? He just looks at you. It's Dairy Queen. Let's go.
It's Dairy Queen. No, we're not taking a shower before we go get a hamburger at Dairy Queen.
Like that, you just kind of, people don't care what other people think of.
You don't wear your Sunday.
Here.
Oh, okay.
At least the most people that I ran into, it's like whatever. I mean, you see people. Okay, you see people in PJs in Walmart.
Fair.
I mean,
Right.
guys, we're just rolling the other day. We're at
Right.
the gas station. There's this guy in like a we need to poop PJs at 8:00 in the morning on 3 cans of Monster Energy.
Wow.
Just rolling out of there, and he's got a little hood thing, and he's probably about 40 years old or so. And we're like, okay,
We all wonder what's
Well,
wrong with him.
Yeah, in Russia, for a woman to run to the store to get like bread and milk, no, she has to put her makeup on,
Right.
wear good clothes, make sure to put on high heels.
Reputation,
Yes, how
saving
you present
face, how
yourself.
you present yourself.
It is
really
changed
matters.
now.
Oh,
It's
okay.
much laid back now.
But still though,
Yeah.
I mean, you'll be hard pressed to see somebody. I mean, people go hungry.
I think it
But
was
they'll
that way
buy
here,
clothes.
like in the 60s. It was that way where you didn't go out in
Yeah.
public without it,
Yes, when
without
you're watching the old
getting done.
footage,
Yeah.
like 50s, 60s.
Sure.
It started to break down in 70s some.
Yeah.
But I love those old footage because
Yeah.
when you put together, let's say, USSR in the 60s
Uh-huh.
and the States,
Mm-hmm.
there's some differences. I mean, you can see the cars, but, the way that people go about their business is so close.
Okay.
Versus then it just started changing was, the culture changes and everything else.
Right.
I mean, I remember talking to one of my friends. She lived here for probably good 10 years, and then she went back to visit her family, and then she comes back and she's like, oh my God, they dress so well, and then you see all these girls wearing, Louboutin shoes, Jimmy Choos,
Yeah.
with nice purses, with Versace clothes on. I'm like, but think about it this way. That's probably that whole outfit. Who knows how long she was saving for it, and that's the only thing she has.
That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then you look at your closet, and you don't know where to put things.
Anything else?
Yep.
Now, speaking of cultural shock, now going back there,
Okay.
you have reverse cultural shock because now you don't really care, but they do. So
Oh.
we were
They still care.
in Riga, and the capital of Latvia.
Okay.
And there's a little town outside of it. It's a resort town called Yurmo. It's like seashore. And my cousin's got a house there, and we had
Kind of like Hamptons.
Okay. The Hamptons.
Got it.
Okay.
And they're like, okay, they're throwing you a key from Toyota because nobody drives Toyota. You can't. You're supposed to carry yourself. You got to have a Beamer at least.
Oh.
I don't care.
The
I'm not afraid to
amount
be seen in
of
Toyota.
Bentleys we've seen there.
Oh, it's crazy. It's crazy. But besides the point, so you roll into a car wash. I mean, we're getting ready to fly back. I'm like, I'll just get the car washed. Get the car washed. And it was about 20 minutes before they closed. So I literally have like a Bentley, some Beamer, some Jaguar, all those nice $100,000 plus cars. And here I am, the little Yoda. The guy walks over to me and goes, we're closed. I'm like, what are you talking about? He goes, we're closed. Like, well, there's people behind me. He goes, no, just pull out. We closed. So as I pull out, everybody else in the nice cars just pulls forward. I'm like, son of a gun.
Oh, they didn't want to wash your car.
Nope.
They didn't want to wash the Toyota.
They don't deal with Yodas anymore. So, you don't care, but they still do in their own way. So it's
Right.
it's different. It's definitely haves and have-nots now.
Mm.
Which is, that's a bit of a culture shock too when we're talking about, in America, it's not really in your face. I mean, you see rich people, you see poor people, but nobody's really in your face. Like, I mean, maybe pop stars and things that you see on TV, they want to present it that way. But on the street, you can meet a millionaire, you will never know, a billionaire, you would never know.
Right.
Versus over there, everybody's got to show you.
Oh, wow.
Mm.
I mean, yeah. So it's a bit of a reverse cultural shock now.
So you guys met in Colorado. You both wound up in Colorado. You settled in Colorado, built or have run businesses for the past,
25 years?
25 years. Okay. Now you're in Missouri. But you're, which we're so glad about. Your experiences coming from the Soviet Union under a planned economy, how did that influence how you ran your businesses and your entrepreneurship, seeking that out in this country?
Well, first of all, it gives you motivation because, again, in a planned economy, and your income is also planned. So it don't matter how hard
You
you
cannot
work.
jump higher than the
Yeah,
roof.
yeah,
Hmm.
you cannot jump
Hmm.
higher than what the set limit is.
Oh.
And here you go. Okay, well, if I have one job, I can do this. What if I have two jobs? Then I can have twice as much. So it's definitely part of it is consumerism. Part of it is just the opportunities out there. I mean, we bought our first house. We're 23, 23, 22?
20, 22, 23.
And that's just working regular jobs, and we're all working two jobs.
So is that something that would
But it's a motivation.
happen over there at 22 years old?
Well, no. I mean, you can't just have a regular job and buy a house.
No.
You just can't afford it. No. So here, that was definitely a motivation factor. Just coming from place where you can't really accept it, no matter how hard you work. It just don't matter.
Well, and then again about in Soviet, it's different in Russia now, but like during Soviet Union, you can't just go and buy real estate. It was issued to you by the government.
Okay, keep going. I'm interested.
Oh, that's
Because
Okay, so issued.
You had a right for X amount of living space, and I think it went from 95 square feet in
Wait, 95 square feet per person was the right of living space that you had that they would issue you?
Homelessness, Soviet style. You take a bunch of homeless people, and then you go to a house next door, and you go,
you have way too many rooms in your house.
Yeah, how many rooms do you have? All right. There you go. So now you have all these people living in your house, based
whether
on
you want them to or not.
Yes.
Well, and your house is nationalized, so it doesn't really matter.
Your house is nationalized.
Yeah, so
you don't own it anyways, so you don't really have a say.
So you have 4 or 5, sometimes up to 17 families living under one roof with one communal bathroom, with one communal kitchen.
And what does it cost?
Close to nothing.
It was very cheap. But
okay.
And then again, that's going back to the waiting list. People get on the waiting list to get their own apartment, and that usually would be done through work. Some people waited for 20 years to move out of the communal living situation into their private apartment.
So having that as a foundation, then the idea that you can work hard and buy something for yourself
was huge.
Yeah.
You just jump on it.
Yeah.
Right.
And then again, the way people lived, it was different too. Here, kind of like you're 18, parents give you your set of luggage, good luck. Sometimes. Or you move to college or something.
Not anymore.
Not anymore. Maybe in the 80s. Maybe in the 80s.
Well, when we got here, that was still the way it was looked at.
In the 90s, that was kind of
kids could still afford to move out and rent an apartment, even with roommates.
Off you go.
Well, kind of funny how, again, we just go in full circle to where kids could not afford to move out of the parents' house, and now we're back to the same thing.
Yeah, well, in the Soviet Union, it would be, generational thing, it's multiple generation living under the same roof. Sometimes you had, 2, 3, not bedroom, 2, 3 room flat, as they were called, and then you would have grandparents, parents, and kids living there, 6, sometimes 8 people.
Wow.
Yeah. And there was a construction boom right after World War II, and pretty much through the 80s, really. But there were plans for concrete panel homes. Let's say there was 20 different variations of apartments. So you would build 20 different variation apartments throughout the country. I mean, the homes all look the same. I mean, there's blocks and blocks and blocks. They all look the same. There's different variations on the inside, but let's say there's only 20 different varieties, and so there'll be 20 different square footages, give or take, based on hypothetically the amount of people that are going to be living there. So your manufacturing or let's say furniture makers. Whatever they make will be based on the measurements for those apartments. So the furniture fits.
Yeah.
I mean, everything was
This
tied
is phenomenal.
together. Well, everything was tied together. That's what I'm saying.
Right,
When
right.
it collapsed,
Now what?
everything just went.
Well, my parents got the apartment that they were living at through my dad's work, and it was right before I was born. So it was, they gave them a 2-room flat based on 3 people. So as soon as I was born, my dad got on the waiting list to, improve the living conditions to get a bigger apartment, and they waited for 16 years.
Wow.
And then Soviet Union fell apart, so they never got it. And so
Wow.
it was 4 of us living in the 2-room apartment.
Wow.
And it's not a 2-bedroom living room,
Yeah.
big kitchen. No, I mean, the kitchen, we talk about kitchen, it's probably,
Half of this room.
well, a good 5 feet by 10-ish.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, that would have to accommodate a table, cabinets, and everything else. So, I mean, tiny.
That'd be 6 to 9 square yards we're talking about.
And then the entryway, you can kind of squeeze in and hang your clothes, and then it'll be 2 rooms. They're bedrooms. They're not family room, living room situations. It's just bedrooms.
Personal room was almost an unattainable dream for every Soviet child.
Your own room.
Your own
Yep.
room.
If you were a single child,
That was
sometimes you
huge.
had to share with your grandparents.
Oh.
Or, if it was pretty much all siblings were sharing the same room.
Right.
Sure.
And then you start watching the movies and like, oh my God, look at those houses. Those kids have their own personal rooms,
Mm.
Of course.
Wow.
All you gotta accept it. You just go and overthrow the government and it's gonna look so good.
Mm.
No, and then you watch Home Alone and that mansion and
Oh, right.
You're wondering how much they pay mortgage, but yeah. Anyways,
Of course, we were watching Home Alone, and it was
Thinking the same thing.
thinking the same
well, and that's the
thing.
thing. Like, we did not have an understanding that
That
about
people were
3%
living in single
of
wide
Americans
trailers.
actually live that way.
Right. Right.
But nobody explained that part.
Right.
So,
That we were like living in double wides and
well, although I say the double wide, and people kind of
well,
look at it as like, double wide. A lot of those concrete boxes, I'll take double wide any time of the day.
oh
Right.
yeah, I could see
I
that.
mean,
Yes.
well, and then again, a lot of the, we talking about, we came from big cities, but then you go further into the country, smaller towns, living conditions there were horrific because,
really?
they would take, pre-revolution homes that were all falling apart and they'll just stuff it with as many people they can.
See, I was thinking in my mind that the country was going, the people living out in the country would have had, a cottage or smaller house, but more like an American farmhouse, I guess, in my mind is what I had.
Some did.
Okay.
Some
Well,
did.
the problem was if you were in the country, you probably working for a collective farm. And not only that, but if you're a collective farm, they would take your passport away and you couldn't travel. So you couldn't even leave collective farm. If you go to nearest city, you probably could, but you cannot venture far out of it. You wouldn't even have your passport.
So do a little bit of a lesson just for people watching and listening. Collectivism and a collective farm, because many people I know in our country, it would be similar to a sharecropper in a sense, but even more extreme.
Even more extreme.
Okay, so collectivism.
So basically, the government took over the land. There was no in the Soviet Union. There was no private ownership per se. So you did not own your land, and so a lot of farmers who had some land, who worked prior to the revolution, it was all taken away. It was all taken away from them, probably like late 20s, early 30s they started it.
There was so many different things. So at
It's just
first, the cities were going hungry, and farmers would not deliver to the cities because the money was worthless.
Hmm.
Oh.
Everybody's on strike. Everybody's protesting. Nobody's manufacturing anything.
And this is in early 1900s.
That's early 1918.
1918. Okay. Right. Okay.
everybody was striving toward world revolution, and
Emancipation and
Mhm.
everybody and poor people in Germany. Well, your kids are starving.
Yeah.
I mean, it was crazy times. But the cities were going hungry,
Okay.
and the government had to feed the workers. The blue collar had to be fed. So they go in the country. Well, nobody would deliver anything because why? I mean, that money's not going to do you any good if you go to a city and can't buy anything.
Hmm.
You can't buy anything manufactured, so people were just hoarding food. So they ended up employing an army, starting Perestroika, which would be, they would give you a set amount of grain that you're supposed to collect and send you out in the fields. Um, so that led to confiscation of most of the food.
So the
And
government just confiscated it.
yeah, the
They just came to the farms
yes,
and
exactly.
took
And
what
took
they
whatever,
needed
and took whatever
or
they
what
needed,
or wanted.
and then some.
whatever they can find.
Okay, so they take the government gets involved. They come in, they start taking the food from the people
Mhm.
and the farmers.
From the farmers.
Okay.
Um,
Hmm.
and then send it to the city.
Okay.
And then there it will go to distribution centers and will be equally distributed among
So
the
at
workers.
that point, had they taken the ownership of the land?
No, at that point, there was still some. Again, the slogans were "land to peasants, factory to workers." So in theory, it was supposed to be like one large co-op where everybody's happy, slaving away and getting given to your abilities and getting to your necessities, something like that.
Okay.
But the country was starving
Mm-hmm.
because the food was removed, and then the famine.
Because for several years, nobody planted anything.
Well, and people stopped planting. I mean, what's the point in planting when you're going to get it confiscated? And whatever the seed stock was there got eaten. So now you have no seed stock. You have nothing. So the crop,
Oh wow.
just to give you an idea, it went in 1920, only 18% of cropland was actually planted. So you're looking at a drop of 80,
2%.
yeah, 82%. And that's why we're talking about famine in Ukraine. But it was not just Ukraine. I mean, it was pretty much everywhere in the country. And
So did they start forcing at that point? Like, okay, so farmers just don't want to.
right.
Never.
So,
we can't get anything out of it. So
So yeah, let's organize them
So let's
and make them
organize
plant.
and make them plant. So the country went and they had to buy the seed stock because everything was depleted. And of course, nobody would take the money.
Mhm.
Everybody wanted something solid like gold.
Right.
So that's why all the gold disappeared from the churches, and they were pulling gold leaf off the churches and everything else because everything was smelted, and then it was sent. Most of it was actually sent to the United States.
Yep, the museums were depleted of whatever they could sell
in exchange for grain and seed stock, and then everybody was ordered into collective farms, given the seeds, taking their passports away, and going, "You go at it."
Wow.
Or well, there's all sorts of possibilities. None of them are good, and you had a plan. You're supposed to provide X amount of this farm, and there'll be a dude in charge who'll be watching over you. But again, if you don't fulfill the plan, you're not going to live long. Just the way it is.
So it disappeared. It was about this time, I think, that you have a story.
Yes. So my great grandparents were farmers, and then at that time they were called kulaks, not gulag as in the concentration camps, but kulaks as the farmer that has a little extra or a little more than the average person.
Okay.
So in
Okay.
their case, they had a cow and a couple of chickens. So they were
And
better.
that's extra.
Yeah. So they were better off than most. And they had their house. They had a nice plot of land.
Mm.
And so they had some visitors who came in to take whatever they can. And my grandfather was one of them. They refused to give away their cow because that's what was feeding their family,
Mhm.
and they were shot. And everything was confiscated.
Wow.
And then he ended up marrying my grandma so he can take over the land and the house.
Wow.
Good grief.
Yeah, and that's all I know. The family never talked about it. Grandma never really talked about it much. I know just little bits and pieces I learned from my mom or from some of my aunts and uncles, but not much. And then again, we knew about it, but it was never
brought up.
Nobody dwelt on it. It was just
Move
kind of,
on.
yeah, it happened. We know about it. Let's move on. And then again, I never met my grandfather.
Okay.
I never met my grandfather on mom's side, and she didn't really have a good relationship with him either because he divorced my grandma after the 8th child was born.
Mm.
Oh, wow.
Kind of, because grandma was very religious, and he said that didn't help him to move up with his political career.
Oh.
Wow. Wow.
And all of that
So
entire story is based on food shortage.
yeah.
Yeah.
And then you look at the Soviet Union in general, between between World War One, Revolution, World War Two, Stalin's repressions, every family was affected in one way or another.
Yeah. So people really didn't talk much about it just because everybody had the same
Everybody.
story
Right.
or similar. So there was not. Well, and again, I mean, some of the stuff you didn't want to bring it up just because you never know who you're talking to.
Yeah, like his
Mm.
grandfather spent years in Stalin's camps.
We still don't know why.
Wow.
Really?
Well, there was a story, but
What's
actually,
true? What's true?
Well, one of the things we're going to try and do is maybe go back to archives and
Oh, right.
see if we can pull something out.
Mm-hmm.
We tried once before and basically said there's no records of them, which, well, there's got to be something somewhere.
Right.
Although a lot of them, again, between the wars and everything else, a lot of things got destroyed.
Sure.
It is the way it is.
Right.
But yeah.
Well. Wow.
And again, it was the food. As soon as the cities stop producing, the country's going to start saving up
Mm-hmm.
and kind of go back into their hole. And because what good is the city going to do anybody? And
you guys fairly recently have bought your own farm.
It's been a couple of years.
and
made a move now out of Colorado onto your property, building your own homestead. Yeah.
Exciting.
Are there signs of the times here that you've been living here for nearly 30 years? Are there some signs or signals that have led you to?
You said that you made the comment that it's almost in their DNA now, is how you said it, that they just have a sense.
It's subconscious, yes.
And they would go into a mode. Is that?
Are you in a mode?
I think so. I think so. I mean, we kind of laugh at it, but at the same time,
Yeah, it's serious.
Yeah, especially after this whole COVID thing started.
Yeah.
People, I mean, you see the society collapsing just like that. I mean, people shooting each other over a roll of toilet paper, and things escalate fast. You see the
see varieties disappearing at the store.
Mhm.
You know, even like you would come in, you had endless amount of whatever bread, cereals, deli meats, and now you see that it's getting smaller.
Uh-huh.
Things are no longer
So-
available. Now we got a long way to go to the USSR, but
Inflation is one of them.
you got inflation that's going through the roof. You got a court system that is really questionable now. People stop having faith in the government, and that's all the government is. It's a faith-based system, it's just like religion.
Collapse
As
of
long as you have a
education.
faith in the government, it's going to keep going. Once you lose that faith, and when you watch TV, you can see the riots on the streets, and they say, "Oh well, it's heated but mostly peaceful protests." Okay, fine. It's not what I see, so I'm just going to make my own conclusion. When you look at judicial system where people getting prosecuted and or held in jail for no apparent reason, and no sentencing being done. I mean, we have political prisoners now for people going in for the memes.
Or when you have
There's two types of people in Gulag: ones that are telling jokes, and the other ones who are listening or laughing at them.
Really?
Yeah.
well, like when you look at this, I'm sure you heard of certain cases when you realize that something's wrong with it when the villain becomes the victim and the hero becomes the villain. Somebody who tries to help all of a sudden is villainized.
Mm-hmm.
You see, people being basically demoralized. I mean, we're talking about, no matter how hard you work, you're not going to get anywhere in the USSR. I mean, arguably, but we'll start seeing the same stuff here, especially with the youngsters, with the inflation and everything else, where it don't matter how hard they work, they can't afford a house. They
Right.
can barely afford a vehicle. They can provide themselves with basic necessities, but it's nothing to what it was. I remember it.
Right.
And that was just late 90s,
Mm-hmm.
where I work a day and my rent is covered. Another day, my gas for a month is covered. And then you're just walking around as 18-year-old, 19-year-old with wads of cash going,
Mm-hmm.
what should I do now?
Mm-hmm.
And that's just working, construction job. So we definitely see a lot of those tensions. And again, people, I think the social contract is just being dissolved right in front of our eyes. People don't have faith in the government, no matter who's in the government.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't think we're going to agree anytime soon on the things that we've seen.
And there's other signs like the fall of morals, the fall of a family unit, I guess, because it's not.
So is that something you saw also in USSR when
Yes.
things sort of
Yes.
USSR, I mean,
declining?
despite all the libertarian movements and liberal ideas of
progressivism?
Mm-hmm. Of 1918s, communal wives and things of that nature. After that,
when Stalin took over,
even before that, I think it was fairly conservative society. I mean, the family was centerpiece of.
Family unit was what everything was structured around.
Yeah, everything was structured around family, and I mean,
and faith. Was there faith
prior to revolution? Yes,
prior to revolution.
Okay, so we break down the family, we break down the faith.
Food supplies, education, and military.
Education, military, food supply, collapse. That's kind of how it went.
Currency being devalued, debt.
Currency was
control.
devalued. Currency out of
debt out of control.
Debt out of control.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the signs are there.
Signs are there.
So you mentioned education. You've chosen to homeschool. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, it was COVID. We were forced to take the kids and
home.
Start doing some form of homeschooling, just the way the school system, at least in our county, was operating. So we have to spend a certain amount going online. And once I start paying attention to what's going on, that was a head scratcher. And for us, living in the United States, this country, say what you will, but we're based on Judeo-Christian values.
Yes.
And I think the schools stopped teaching the values, whether it's patriotism, whether it's religion, and I understand the separation of religion and state and everything else.
Mm-hmm.
But we have a freedom of religion, but does not necessarily mean that it's freedom from religion. And the moral compass is no longer there. And we don't go to church every Sunday, but at the same time, we want to see the moral compass in our kids. I mean, how do you tell them right from wrong? They don't know it.
Right.
Where's your compass? How do you know that? How do you build your system of values where there is no values? And I mean, there's just things that the kids, when you're talking to kids that are in school now, it's so funny how you see this clip mentality of here's your parents, here's the real kid, and here's the school.
Mm-hmm.
And then the sexualization of kids too. When this whole transgender idea being shoved down the throat of kindergartners.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they don't understand. Today he's Johnny, tomorrow he wants to be Thomas the Train. They don't have the concept of what they're being fed.
Right.
Yeah, and then you have parents that are, yeah, my kid is this and that, and non-binary. Kids don't even have understanding of what it is.
Right.
And then in the meantime, they cannot read, they cannot write, they cannot spell, they don't know history.
We just need to get back to the basics if we want to save the country. But I'm not even sure if it's possible. I mean, I'm looking at it, like I said, I see the USSR. I see everybody pulling their own way, and nobody can agree on anything.
So you guys did become citizens of the United States?
Yes.
So this is your problem too?
Oh, yeah, of course.
Oh, yeah.
Of course.
No, I mean,
right.
In our perspective, we can see the parallels.
Yeah, exactly. But you guys you belong here now in your heart.
Oh, yeah, this is home.
Yeah.
I mean, although every once in a while we're joking about it, like, the Ural Mountains look real good right now. Our next village is about 600 miles away. Watch all those travel shows.
It's called the Ozarks in the United States.
So my family, I mean, got a line of old believers, and they were, they were kind of scattered all over the empire back in the 1700s. And a lot of them are in Siberia, still live in the villages.
That are very isolated. They have no roads leading to them.
It's sort of no, it's not quite Amish way of living.
But you can compare it to that.
You can compare it to,
and that's the way they choose to live, and where they choose to live. That's of their own choosing.
And
at this point,
they don't want to have anything to do with the government. They don't want to have anything to do with anything.
They're self-reliant.
They're self-reliant. Just leave us alone. They don't want to serve in the army. They don't want to participate in wars. They just want to be left alone. And every once in a while, looking at it, I mean, there's TV just talking about the draft, and little one, she doesn't know. She said, "Dad, are you going to get drafted?" I'm like, "No, I'm too old for that." But you think about it, she is 12, and the Afghan War was what? How long did it take? Almost 20 years.
Yeah.
So I mean, we have generations that grew up with that.
Yep.
And it's amazing, and you kind of start worrying about your kids.
Yeah.
I mean, we're whatever, but there's just a lot of uncertainty.
So how do you describe freedom? What is it to you?
I'll say it's 100 acres of freedom.
100 acres.
It's just being able to produce for yourself, to provide for yourself. I mean, we're lucky we don't have a lot of regulations.
Hardly any.
Hardly any. So that is wonderful.
Yeah.
Having good neighbors. I mean, that goes such a long way.
It does.
So it's a combination of all those things.
Yeah.
Mostly not having the government watching over you. And it doesn't mean that you're doing anything wrong. It's just that, again, pretty much most of the country is so regulated and over-regulated.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, well, you're supposed to have your barn this color.
Mm.
I told
You
guys
cannot
the
have
story because we have
chickens.
so many people coming from different states.
Yeah.
And one of our neighbors, he's kind of a local prankster, and
Oh.
he's driving by a house, and there's a guy who just bought a house,
Mm-hmm.
and he's sitting there with a sprinkler watering the grass in Missouri. Well,
Okay.
he drove by, just kind of gave him a look, turned around, went back, and there's a good neighbor going, "What you doing?" He goes, "Watering the grass." "Well, why would you do that?" "Because I can."
Oh, wow.
And it turned out it was a guy from California who
Yep.
bought a house, and his definition of freedom was to turn on the sprinkler and let it run and just sit there on the porch and watch it run.
Wow.
Mm.
I mean, that's how little we need to define freedom.
Mm.
And everybody's got their own story, and
Mm-hmm.
but there's so many people that are coming to the Ozarks that have their freedom story, and it's those little things. It's not something monumental out there. It's just a little thing.
Yeah, you're right. It is the little things and some of the big ones.
Yeah, but then the little things, they
Add
keep building.
up.
Yep, they
They
keep
add
adding up.
They do.
You know?
I know they have for us too.
Yeah.
Things that we didn't even realize.
Mhm.
Some of the things. And you go, wait. Yeah, that, as you're experiencing no building codes. Oh, well, that's interesting. I had no idea there were no building codes here. But wow, that makes a lot of sense. And I feel the freedom in that. Like, oh my God, we can actually build this house on our timeline the way we want to without all of the regulations.
Yeah,
and
Yeah, but how much would that do for your personal life and just your sanity?
So much.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's the little thing. I mean, talking about the abstract thing that's in the book somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to go to Federalist Papers in order to figure it out.
Yeah. I'm interested in, you discussed that when the Soviet Union collapsed, it was it happened quickly. It not a whole lot of lead up. Are you prepared for that now? Is it something that you think about, given all of the stuff that we've talked about and some that we haven't? But do you think, wow, this could happen again?
Oh, absolutely. I think it's pretty much a certainty it will happen.
In the United States?
I think so. Well, simple things. How are we going to deal with national debt? I mean, keep printing.
Yeah.
Keep printing is nothing but devaluing your money. So now whatever savings you have, whatever savings I have, I mean, we're going to be in a situation where it's going to be, you were saving for a car, and now you can buy a loaf of bread. And that's where we're going back to the education system, where, between literacy rates and, like we're talking about, 54% are
Below
sixth grade. So that goes, how can people understand complex concepts? I mean, you see people on TV going, well, if you can print X amount of money right now, why don't you just print the money and give it to everybody and call it good? And you're talking about politicians being serious about it.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, we're just going to print $2 trillion and give it to disadvantaged people.
Yeah.
Well, that's great. How does that going to work? But we see a lot of that, and that's the kind of people that's already in the government.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the decisions that they make. I mean, I'm sure you probably see it in the military at some point. Sure. You see it in the local governments. You see it everywhere. It's incompetence. So education, we have incompetence, and the people that are incompetent are running the show. Eventually, I think it's a certainty something's going to happen. Are you prepared for it? No.
Like in Colorado, for example, you look at the local politicians, and their solution to every problem is we're going to raise the taxes.
Got it.
Well, and then you look like, for example, in our county, most of the local government officials, they come with nonprofit backgrounds. So they really have no idea how things run, how the businesses work.
Where the
All they
money's
know
coming
is,
from.
yeah, take the money and spend it.
Wow.
So their solution to everything is let's raise the property taxes.
Tax and spend. Tax
Yep.
and
The
spend.
thing that humors me
Right.
though is, and I'm sure you see it around too in the Ozarks. We have a lot of what we call preppers or people that are, they think they're ready for it, whatever it might be. No,
No.
no amount of ammunition, no amount of food will probably help, but they'll also make you a target.
Hmm.
There's a lot of things you just don't think about.
Your gun will not save you from the mob.
Right, a gun will not save you from the
True.
mob. There's just no way to prepare yourself for what's coming. You can try to ease certain things, ease the pain by, having equipment like a tractor you can plow land. Because eventually, even if it's one tractor between all the neighbors, you can make things work. Um, there's certain things you can do, but nobody's going to be prepared for their savings being wiped out, their food being confiscated, or their house being part of the homeless solution problem solution,
Hmm.
where we're just, and we're already seeing it. I mean, we're seeing it in California where they say, well, if it's an empty house, we're just going to let those people stay in there.
It belongs to somebody.
Well, they don't care. I mean, squatters' rights and everything else.
Yeah.
People do it. So we see all those signs that are out there. I just don't think that anybody can be 100%
Prepared.
and most people have no idea what's
Many
coming.
people listening to this might think, well, that's just it's really doomsdayer, well, you're doomer,
No.
But the interesting, or the reason that you guys' perspective is so valuable in our time right now is that you have seen it, you have witnessed it, felt it, lived through it, and are able to look through a completely different lens than the rest of us, and able to provide that perspective to, hey guys, it ain't good.
Well, I think biggest mistake people make is they go, well, I got 10,000 rounds of ammunition and a pile of food. Come get me. What you want to do is you want to network. You want to create a community to where, hey, you know what? I can ask my neighbor to do certain things. I can barter with my neighbor. I can, there's the things. Networking is a way better than locking yourselves up in a bunker and
trying.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
you're going to run out of
if you have a
ammo.
community that's going to get hungry, we're going to go get the bunkers.
Right.
Who knows? But yeah.
So the you've lived it, you experienced it. The country collapsed. Where's your? We've talked about your thought for the future here. Where's your hope? Where's your what's the upside? Like you get up every day and you're hopeful. Where's that coming from? What are you seeing?
I don't think we really look at it that much. We get up and first thought of the day, who's going to go let the chickens out and feed the dogs?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You just look at what you need to do to be self-reliant and don't depend on the government.
I look at you and you give me hope, because to me the especially having served for 25 years this nation, the idea of a potential collapse is very dark. It's very it's very, very heavy. And for you to with everything that you've seen to say it's looking imminent, that's very heavy to me. But you lived it. You lived through it. And now
You're here telling the tale.
And you're happy and you're smiling and you have a family and you have 100 acres of freedom. And so to me, just you being who you are it gives me hope. That is amazing. I think your story is amazing, and you guys being able to share it for me is a huge amount of hope.
Well, and then, if you look through history, every collapse gives birth to something else. I mean, there's empires that collapsed and then it gave birth to something else. The world didn't end, it kept going. It just
That perspective
evolved into something different.
That perspective, though, we don't have it. I can tell you, Shelley and I don't have that perspective. That is something that you're bringing that is unique. That we don't. I would say the majority of at least our generation, we don't have that. It feels devastating. The idea of a nation collapse. Right?
Like the world is coming to an end.
Yeah.
But I mean, there's this idea of national divorce that's been out there for many years. So it's not something that's new. I mean, I think a lot of people seeing the signs, whether or not it's going to come to fruition, who knows? But you also see a younger generation, the kids, that are being homeschooled, that are just different breed.
And that gives you hope.
They're tough. They're resilient.
They're smart.
I was just put a big old smile on my face. There's this girl that was like 3 years old, dragging it. We were cleaning up after his event, and she's dragging the chair, stumbling, falling. And I'm like expecting to catch her. She's gonna cry. She just gets up, grabs the chair that's bigger than her, and she just keeps dragging it. Like, that's the girl. She's gonna be resilient.
Yeah.
And just that ability to overcome. You see a lot of it, especially in the kids that are homeschooled. A lot, the ones that are brought on the farm, they know the value of work, they know the value of food, they know the basics of it. So I mean, we're definitely that gives me hope. I mean, just seeing the younger generation, and they're going to be able to overcome. That kid that's giving it hell, dragging the chair.
Right.
She's going to be resilient. She's going to do it. And, watching Anastasia growing, and, I mean, gosh, she is my best help on the farm. I mean, whether we're setting the T-posts, whether it's doing the chores, and you guys know that too. I mean, when you're watching the kids work, and now they know the value of it.
Sure.
They know where the food comes from. And once you understand the value of things, that's your moral compass. And that's how you quantify, and that's how you network, that's how you meet people. I mean, that's the whole system of values that you create around just the hard work. A lot of people nowadays, I think they're missing it, but you see the resurgence of homesteading, of people leaving the cities and people starting new.
So you mentioned so we've got people coming here from all over the place, it seems. They're wanting to do something else with their families. They're wanting to pull them opt out of the systems that we have been programmed to be in, right? And they're opting out of it. For instance, homesteading. Do you have any advice specifically for people who are headed towards wanting to homestead? Because there are a lot of people saying, I want to go be more self-reliant. I want to go start my own homestead, and I'm going to start growing my own food. And I have a lot of plans.
Be realistic.
Be realistic.
With what you can do. Be realistic about the finances.
Meaning it's not all free?
No. Not at all.
It is not free food that you grew yourself.
It's not free food. And you don't even count your hours that you put in, and it's still not free food.
And nobody's paying you overtime.
Well, first of all, you got to figure out why you're doing this.
Okay.
I mean, what is it? If you're trying to grow clean food, great. If you're trying to bond as a family, awesome.
One of the surviving things and how it helped survive through the fall of Soviet Union is bartering and moonshining. You make some moonshine. Well, because during Gorbachev basically destroyed.
You're talking about ethanol fuel right now, right?
Yeah, sure.
So
Sure.
you're making ethanol fuel to fuel the tractor, and then your tractor gets to plow your land. And
Yeah, you have a plot of land, you need to plant potatoes, but you need to plow it first. If you do it with a shovel yourself, you're going to be doing it for months.
Yeah.
So, but you have some ethanol, and you go to your neighbor who has a tractor and say, hey, I give you this. Can you plow my field?
He converts ethanol into gas and keeps.
Right?
But seriously, though, I mean, you got to be realistic and just set your goals. You cannot look at, you're feeding your chickens and you spend X amount of food on food and you got X amount of eggs and it doesn't equate. It will never equate. I mean, you cannot quantify your farm production unless you're a mega farm where your chickens are all in the cage being tilted up and down depending on their needs. Those eggs might be mighty expensive eggs, but they're good.
They're very good. And they're
they're
good for you.
yours.
And you
I
can't
mean,
eat
people get
chicken feed.
People get discouraged because they expect it to be a business and it's not. So like my buddy said, well, you got yourself a very expensive hobby. In a sense it is, but I the way I see it, I mean, it's going back to the freedom. I mean, I'm looking at those pigs running through the woods going.
Yeah. And the fact that you don't rely on the grocery store for every bite of food that your family eats.
Well, and the quality is just, you cannot compare it.
No.
But, be ready to be tired. Be ready to be tired. Be ready to have breakdowns and meltdowns and equipment breakdowns. And, I mean, there's some people that are asking for help because they're trying to get out of here. And they spent all their resources on trying to make it and they never made it. And their truck broke down. So they can't even get out of here. There are stories like that.
Yeah.
I mean, but on the other hand, you hear stories about people, there's like couples, 3 kids living out in the tent, building their own cabin with the wood they harvested on their own acreage.
Yeah.
Freedom.
Yeah.
Everybody's seeking that, whatever that means to them.
Exactly. So just be realistic. Set up small goals, little victories. I mean, if you can do that, then you're gonna have something big. But don't just plan on being done in 6 months with all your infrastructure, and be realistic about your sweat equity and
it's a way of life, and it's long. It's a marathon.
It is.
It is, and
it's not a sprint for sure.
Yeah, and then you gotta learn how to prioritize. And your family time is a priority too. You have to make sure you spend time with each other. You have to spend time with your kids.
Yeah.
It's very important. The chicken coop can wait, but your kid will grow up before you know it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's
They do grow up and leave.
That's the biggest thing of running the businesses and working doubles and doing all that. There's one thing you cannot buy is time. And your kids will grow up and they'll be gone, and you'll be sitting there going, well, was it really worth it? And I think that's part of the stuff that brought us here, to where we closed down one business and we sort of let go of the other as far as just not being as hands-on.
Yeah.
And just
let somebody else manage it.
Going,
right.
We have people in place. Let's just let it go, see what happens. And we're blessed with having the right people in the right places. But that was hard. Well, you get to see your kids growing up. I mean, I have not seen Anastasia for the first 3-4 years probably.
Yeah.
Just because we're running this laundry plant and we're doing this and we're doing all those projects, and it feels good to provide.
Yeah.
But then the trade-off, I mean, do you really want this late model car? Do you really need this big old house? Or are you being better off driving an older clunker and living in a smaller house and
hanging out with your kids? Yeah.
And, tending to animals and going on a hike on your own property.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So things like that.
We agree.
It's being if freedom. You don't have the customers waiting on you. I mean, yeah, you have your customers
Yeah,
waiting
you
on
do.
you, all right. But you know what I mean.
Yeah. Yes.
They can always address the customer service.
Complaint line.
Exactly. If they complain too much, they're gonna end up in a soup. I mean, that's just the way it is. But so it's definitely different. I think mentally, if you're prepared, you're gonna be in a much better spot than just trying to hit the deadlines and worrying about supply chains and things breaking down. I mean, I still have to deal with some of that, but it's huge not to have it every day.
Another piece of advice would be probably get books, real books, hard copies, not the electronic versions of it.
Yep. As resources.
And, it's like
make yourself a library.
Make yourself a library.
Google.
Just because internet is not always reliable.
Not when you're in the
especially
country.
here. No, not.
In any
Here we are,
country.
21st century America,
Rural.
and you cannot sometimes call anybody, or you cannot find information on the internet because it's just not working.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
That's
then
true.
when you have a medical emergency with your livestock, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
You can't find that YouTube video how to fix your chicken leg, and
Right.
And unfortunately, a lot of YouTube videos lately have been useless.
yeah,
And a lot of information. I don't know if you guys, maybe it's just me, but when you're trying to look something that is related to homesteading, growing things, there's just a bunch of mumbo jumbo that's absolutely useless.
Yeah.
and you
You
end
gotta
up
go
wasting hours trying to find
Trying
one
to
little
find a
piece of information.
Right.
So now we're kind of catching ourselves going back to the book just because it seems like the information that you're getting off the web now is just either irrelevant or people are
Filtered out.
It's just
Right.
It's just
not
made
helping.
for clickbaits, I guess. A lot of
yeah.
it.
I think there's just a lot of garbage out there that you don't really. You're wasting a lot of time
Right.
looking through it.
Sure.
And then get your kids off the devices too. Like, well, you can't do it an hour, day and time, age and. But limit it.
Try to get them outside the bed.
Get them outside
Yeah.
and get them to read.
And get them off. Yeah. Get them involved in whatever is going on your homestead.
Yeah.
Pull them in. Let them. One thing that we do is even if it isn't, when kids are doing things, it's often not going to be exactly the way that we would do it. But let them do it. Let them
But then again, even
do it their way.
fencing project with your kid might lead to a physics lesson.
Oh, right. Right.
History lesson,
That's
economy.
right. Yes.
That's
Oh, yeah. That's
every
right.
time, a lot of times when you set in your ways and kids are doing it differently, I'll at least attempt to explain why I'm doing it this way.
Yeah.
Because they get discouraged.
Yes, they do.
And you're just like, sometimes you go,
I can't do it right.
I can just do it myself way faster than you just being. But if you explain them why, they can be your best helpers out there.
Oh, yeah.
And that helps them think through it.
Mm-hmm. And learn.
And you spend
And learn.
time with them. It can be a history lesson or
Any lesson. Yeah.
any lesson. You
Yep.
just talk to kids, and while you got time,
Mm-hmm.
and when you're working together, you got time. You're making it.
Yeah.
And the time is priceless.
Yep. That's right.
Speaking of time,
Well, guys, this
This-
has been awesome.
it's been
This has
amazing.
been really, really fun.
It's
Man.
been a pleasure.
Yeah. Thank you so
wow.
much.
And then again, we just scratched the surface.
I know.
And there's a lot of the subjects that we talk about. You have to dive so deep into them to even get a little bit of understanding of what was really happening. And
Right.
again, what we were saying, it's just our perspective. It's, how we saw it. And again, we saw it being kids.
Sure. Yeah, sure.
And it's just,
but as I said, you do have a perspective, and your willingness to share that is amazing, and we really appreciate it.
Yeah.
So thank you. Thanks for your time. This has been awesome. Thanks for your openness.
Yeah. Yeah. This has been great.
It's been really cool. So thank you.
All right. Well, this has been awesome. And thank you guys again. And until next week, bye, y'all.
Bye, y'all.
bye.